Now that was better, wasn't it? What a nice manager. Much better outcome. Tone was set right from the beginning because this wasn't a disciplinary matter really. Made her feel welcome, let her talk first, listened actively, showed empathy, and we ended up with some agreement and some action at the end, which was fantastic. So asked you at the end though to start looking at things to do with meetings, and I asked you to think before we sort of started here about why do we have meetings. Let's look at what you've written down and hope it includes the following. They're really to get things done so that we can make decisions. It's where we bring the relevant people together so they can communicate, and that's what we've been talking about in this unit, communicate, so they can communicate and save time. And as we said, if they all stayed away in their individual places, we'd have asynchronous communication, and that could take forever with the come-ins and go-ins and waiting for responses. But if we have a meeting, we bring them all together, whether that's face-to-face, whether that's a digital meeting or a mix of both nowadays, so some sort of conference with some people on the phone, some people there, we get synchronous communication, and that's driven by the chair. I hope that's what we agree. I hope that all sort of ties up with what you had. I've been in many ineffective meetings, and all the reasons could be summed up really and laid at the chairperson's door really. It's a very important, very expansive role, and we're going to have a look into it in a bit more detail. So while it is the role of the chair to run the meeting, and as we said, that's a role that we're going to look at in great detail, it's also that the participants have a fundamental role and responsibility in making it successful. So an effective meeting needs people to undertake any necessary preparation, anything they need before the meeting, not people turning up saying, oh no, I haven't got that, or I haven't looked at that. They need to arrive on time. I've always said to people about running meetings, the way to stop meetings running over is to start on time. It's amazing how many don't start on time. You need to keep an open mind. You're there to communicate, and you need to listen to other people's opinions. And it's about participating. That doesn't mean dominating the proceedings, and it means avoiding conflict situations, avoiding side conversations that distract others. And again, a lot of these things the chair has got to take a part in. Asking questions to clarify understanding, not leaving the meeting, as I've been with people who said, oh, I didn't really know what that was about. Noting down any agreed actions so that you can carry on with them, and then after the meeting undertaking any agreed actions that you've been tasked with, and also briefing others appropriately to make sure they know what's going on. So all of that is a responsibility of all participants, including the chair, but it's the chair's job to enforce those things. So we'll start having a look now and break down what the chair's actual responsibilities and the key things that they've got to do. So before we look at the process that the chair will go through, and we'll identify in there where the key documents come in, let's identify and make sure we're clear what the key documents are and what their purpose is. So probably the first document and the mainstay for the chair is the agenda. And really, it's simply a list of things we want to discuss or do at the meeting. Vital for an effective meeting and vital for the chair to be able to keep control. It's useful because it helps to plan for the chair, and it helps other people the opportunity to think about the meeting in advance, so them to plan and prepare. It allows you to get through the meeting effectively, cover all the points in a timely manner because you can follow the plan. It helps to provide people at the meeting with something to follow so they know what to expect and when they're going to get involved. And it provides a record of what was due and what should have been discussed and decided at the meeting. So at the end, we know that it's been effective. It's formally the chair's job to prepare the agenda. However, in a lot of situations, they'll do that combined with the secretary to produce the agenda, making it a lot easier. And in some very small informal meetings, the whole group might put it together, or in standard meetings, such as a regular staff meeting, it may be a standard agenda that's just used every time. So the main areas that should be in it, because there are some examples in a handout of different sort of ways of laying out an agenda, and your organisation probably has an agreed criteria, but very simply it should contain who's required to attend, any apologies that you know about for absence in advance, then the agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, a section for any other business, and a date of the next meeting. But I didn't mention there an important point. It should say when and where the meeting is taking place as well. But the examples show that, and I'm sure that you have got something within your organisation. When does that get prepared? Well, it should be prepared in advance. It's a tool to help with planning, preparing resources, so it needs to be done in advance so that it can be issued and that people have time to organise themselves, because it's going to help others prepare. If you've got speakers or people who have a role in the meeting, they will need to know so they can prepare. And really, it should be at least the week before. But as I said, again, going back to that, for smaller, more regular meetings, it may be prepared on the day or on the day before if they're just regular sort of meetings. But really, it depends on your planning and your preparation of how much and how many other people are involved in the meeting. And you'll be using the previous minutes of the previous meeting probably in that, because they help set the scene, and often there's parts on that which are going actions which have been carried over to the next meeting, so going to be part of your agenda. It works as a reminder there to who said what actions there are, what's been carried on to the next meeting. But it's also a chance for people to bring up any issues, look at them, because at that meeting really they should be being agreed as part of your meeting, agreeing the previous minutes as a confirmation and a record of what was said at the last meeting. And in some cases, for company meetings, board, shareholder meetings, that is a legal requirement that they're ratified and agreed at the next meeting. So that's the previous minutes. And then we've got all that preparation, the information that is required for all those things. So it could start first of all with things like protocols about how the meetings are run and how they're conducted, and procedures that go along with your organisation for meetings. But more importantly, you need that agenda in place so that people can start to gather the reference material needed for the meeting. So for example, if there needs to be details of financial constraints or things that have gone on before that need to be taken, I don't know, there may have been a report from somewhere, or documents such as reports on financial situations or the new planning or something, or the new strategic plan that needs to be at the meeting so that people can make sure the meeting's effective. So it's the chair's responsibility in some respects to make sure that all that's considered and that everything's there, so that we don't have a situation at a meeting where they can't do something because something's not available. And then there's the minute meetings, the minutes of the meeting, and we'll talk later on about how they're done, but they're there so that there's a record of who said what decisions were made, any actions, and any outcomes that were agreed. So key documents that we'll need, and we'll need to understand as we start to look at the process that the chair goes through for chairing a meeting. So as we've already started to establish, I think the process starts way before the meeting takes place, and it's the preparation before the meeting. The chair has to start thinking about things like the agenda, as we discussed before. The agenda often decided by the chair and secretary, we said, and however it can also be an opportunity to get other members to contribute and get other people involved. So you might want to put up suggestions on the notice board. That's a common one, to get people to put things that they want at the next meeting. At the previous meeting, you might ask for items for the next agenda. You could send out a notice of the meeting and ask people to contact you with suggestions, but always remember to give them the contact details. And I think you should be asking yourself the following questions as you try and put the agenda together. Why are you having the meeting? What end result do you want from it? So what is the outcome? What needs to be discussed, and do you need any other speakers? Who are the attendees going to be? Do you need to get more information about the discussion? Do you need someone else to give an introduction or prepare something? And how are you going to distribute all the information in advance of the meeting? So once you've got those sort of things together, and you've from that worked out your timings, you can then start thinking about the venue. And with that planning, you can start thinking about, is it a suitable size venue, location and facilities? Because depending on that, who's going to attend and who needs to attend is where the meeting's going to be, how you're going to carry out that meeting, how many people are going to be attending, and what facilities are available as well. Do people need presentation facilities? Do they need a lectern, etc., etc.? And all those things. From the other say, is it going to be a suitable venue so that people can contribute? Because as we said, if people can't contribute, then the meeting's going to be pointless. Also from that, you can then see what documents you need and start bringing all those together. So you've got your agenda, which you've now written. Do you need any other previous information? And will all those documents be available at the time? Do you have all the information that's required? And have you considered what's in the previous minutes into your documentation? So that's all before the meeting, and then of course from there we send out the agenda and all that planning that we've done so that people are aware of when, what, how and when the meeting is going to take place. So let's move on to looking at what we do once the meeting started. So the real meat in the sandwich, the process, actually leading the meeting on the day of the meeting. You know, what makes a good chair? Well, a chair helps the meeting run smoothly and efficiently, really. Is the person who chairs the meeting is often really deemed as just a facilitator. And there are three sort of parts of that. There's the timing, the communication, and the process. So they have to make sure the meeting starts and finishes on time, that everyone's views are heard and that clear decisions are reached. And then they have to make sure that all the business that was on the agenda is discussed and that there are minutes or a true record of the meeting. So let's break timing, communication and process down. So the chair is responsible for managing the time based on the agenda and the objectives that have been set out. So you use the agenda timings, always thinking about the meeting overall, not just the topic under discussion. And you've got to monitor that as you go away. You're keeping to a plan, and you direct any distractions to any other business. So anything that's off topic. You may need to be autocratic in this sort of situation, as we talked about in Unit 300, to move things forward, to maintain control. If people are getting heated or people are trying to dominate, you may have to use your autocratic nature to try and keep to the agenda and start bringing people back on track. Then there's ensuring there's effective communication, because that's what this meeting is all about, isn't it? We talked about it. Meetings are about bringing people together so they can communicate and so they can get things done. So you may need to ensure a balance between everyone's views and getting through the business. And it's not your job as a chair to put your opinions into that, really, unless that's part of your role. Some meetings the chair has a vote or is involved, but you need to make sure that people aren't getting excluded, that nobody is dominating the meeting, because exclusion is key. You need to be reading the non-verbal signals so you can draw out people's opinions, recognise when quieter people can't get a word in, so that you can bring everyone together and ensure that there's cooperation to gain agreement. We don't want a one-sided approach. You may need to use some of the tactics from the section we just looked at when we looked at difficult or challenging conversations there. You may need to use open questions. You may need to summarise, to clarify things, to get to a position where you can gain agreement. And you may need to be participative. You may need to be involved in the conversations to drive them forward, and you may need to be directive to get people to go towards a decision by sort of reminding them that we need to get to a point where we have a decision. And then there's about ensuring that process happens. It's about being in charge, and you need to ensure that the meeting is orderly, that it follows organisational procedures and norms, and that there are no conflict, that you ensure decisions are made. Otherwise it's a totally wasted opportunity, wasted meeting. We need to make sure that you drive these at some point. You may have to be participative, not giving your opinions unless that's part of your role and you have a vote, but being authoritarian to stop people dominating, and making sure that you participate and bring other people into the conversation and draw out their ideas and their thoughts. You have a responsibility to ensure there's a record, and you may need to help and guide the minute taker, the secretary, with those things. Sometimes you can do that by stopping and summarising stuff. If you notice that they're looking a little bit confused or flustered, or they're not following things, you've got to read that minute taker's non-verbal signals and have a good relationship with them, because Summarising will also give other people in the room time to think about where they're up to and maybe bring you closer to gaining a decision or an agreement, but that can give the minute taker a bit of time to catch up. And if they're confident, you know them well enough, you could ask them to read back what they've got so far as another way of summarising, but they need the confidence to do that. And finally, if everything's running smoothly, it can be a little bit of the leadership of laissez-faire in that everyone else is maintaining control and you can just sit back and keep an eye on the agenda and think about how you're going to sort of sum things up and bring it to an end. Everyone will need to learn about how to chair a meeting well. It takes practice. If you don't have the experience of that process and it seems a bit daunting, then you can get confidence by watching other people do it, follow them, think about what they're doing. But the other thing is we have to remember it's not finished there. Loads of people think the meeting's finished, oh, it's all over, but there is still some major work to be done after the meeting. As we said, it doesn't end there. After the meeting, there's still a lot of work to do and very important work. We need to ensure the minutes are completed and prepared. So we need to meet and check with the minute taker and check they're happy of what's in there. They will then prepare a draft and we can review and check those and agree them before we distribute them. Different methods of distributing them. They could go by email, they could be posted out, they could be put on an intranet, they could be put on a notice board, but whichever, you need to let people know. It's important. Some places require them to put a signature on it to say that they've read them and understood them. Not really necessary if you're going to bring them to next meeting and get them reviewed and agreed, but they need to go out ASAP really while it's still fresh in people's minds so that they can sort of agree with them and say what they think. And then it doesn't end there because we need to follow up on the actions, and people say, oh well, people have been given an action, they're responsible for it, but we need to first of all make sure people are aware and fully understand what their actions are. We then need to confirm they've got the resources and the authority needed to complete those actions, and then we don't want to leave it there either. We want to continue to check on it and check on progress and check that they're going to be ready, because we could be saving ourselves a job, because at the next meeting some of those actions might be part of our agenda, and if we just leave it and say, oh, they'll do it, then it comes to the next meeting and as we're preparing we're already under pressure with our agenda and things haven't been completed. Oh, and by the way, just check as the chair you haven't got any actions that you need to complete while you're hassling other people as well. And then we need to be checking on the outcomes before we start preparing the next agenda. So we'll be checking to see if things are completed and are they going to be ready. We'll be keeping ourselves informed and checking that people have completed their actions where appropriate, and make sure we're all in a position ready to go for the next agenda. So we talked about minutes there in great detail about how we go about the process of making sure they're complete and helping the minute taker, reviewing them, agreeing them and distributing them. They can come in many different forms depending on your organisation, and we can really though just split those into two different categories. Like I say, your organisation's probably got a template or a standard layout, but there's going to be full minutes or records of decisions. So a full minutes, all details of what was generally covered and discussed, not word for word, but the main points, plus any actions and decisions, plus they're going to say who, the standard stuff, when it happened, who attended, etc., and any sort of apologies or incidences that happened. Or you're going to have just a record of decisions, which again is going to say who, when, what, where, but it's just going to record what actions were taken and what decisions were agreed. Now they're used more for regular standard meetings that don't happen so often, or informal meetings, but out of all that we need minutes, because first of all, in certain circumstances, boards and companies, they are legal records and need to be recorded, and secondly, they're just a record of evidence that's always useful for us, one for going back on for the record, and secondly for the agenda being prepared for the next meeting. So it's a good way of making sure we've got a record of what happens, so strongly advised that they're recorded and well written. So let's just start to recap on what we've covered, because we've been through a lot. Our aims were to understand the different forms of communication and their application, to understand how to manage and challenge conversations, and to know how to chair a meeting. There was a lot to get through, and we said by the end of the session we would be able to compare different forms of communication, including their strengths and weaknesses, explain when and why each form of communication can be used effectively, explain how to prepare for difficult, challenging conversations, describe techniques that can be used to managing challenging conversations, and explain how to effectively deliver constructive feedback. Describe the circumstances under which issues should be escalated. And then for meetings, which we've just done, we talked about describing the key documentation that a chairperson should produce and circulate prior to the meeting, identify the steps a chairperson should need to undertake when preparing for a meeting, explain how to effectively facilitate a meeting, and describe the steps that a chairperson needs to undertake to ensure that actions are agreed during the meeting once the meeting is completed. I think we covered all those, although there was a lot to go through, and we've got a final slide about what to do next. So what have we got to do next? Well, this unit is externally assessed by doing an online assessment, which is tested with Unit 302, Building Relationships, which is the next unit we're going to do. So you've got nothing to worry about at the moment. The test, which is Unit 381, Communication and Building Relationships, will be done in an agreement of a date between your assessor, yourself and your employer when you're closer to completing or after you've completed Unit 302, Building Relationships. The test contains 40 questions with 45 marks, and there's a maximum duration of 60 minutes to complete it, and the pass mark isn't excessive, so it's 24 out of the 45 marks. Once that test is completed, you've actually passed those 2 units. So Unit 318, the online test, means you've passed Unit 302, Building Relationships, and Unit 303, Communication, which you've just done. So what I want you to do, because you don't have to worry about that too much, is I want you to look at identifying a meeting that you can chair for Unit 307, which is the skills unit of communication. So the skills unit is where you need to produce evidence. That meeting needs to be a comprehensive business discussion, a comprehensive meeting where a business decision and discussion takes place, where you reach and agree with colleagues on actions that are to be achieved, and you'll have to show that you've constructively challenged one of the following in the meeting: process, a concept or a view, and presented information to the audience and checked that they understand it. So it needs to be a significant meeting, not just a get together. And you just need to start thinking about it now and identifying meetings that you either can chair, or if you're not in a position currently to do that, it'll be about identifying it early so that we can talk to your manager and find out about what opportunities are available for you to doing it. So just something to be doing in the background. There's a link in the resources at the end of this that can lead you to Unit 307, where there is a full briefing sheet about what's required for the evidence for that. And also after that you can start completing the next unit, which is Unit 302, Building Relationships.